We are live. Okay. We'll call this workshop session to order of the Board of Supervisors. I'll ask Administrator Tafflin to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll ask Amanda to do a roll call, please.
Mr. Conover.
Here.
Mr. Mayday. Mr. Diamond.
Here.
Ms. Gilligan. Here. Ms. Turner. Here. Mr. Bruno.
Here.
Mr. Driscoll.
Here.
Mr. Patchit.
Here.
Mr. Drossy.
Here.
Mr. Bean.
Here.
Mr. Cressida.
Here.
Mr. Merlino.
Here.
Mr. Stroud.
Here.
Mr. Wild.
Here.
Mr. McGowan. Mr. Strainer.
Here.
Mr. Etu.
Here.
Mr. Thomas.
Here.
Ms. Runyon. Here. Chairman Garrity.
Here.
Quorum is established.
Okay, we're going to go right into presentation by the administrator. He'll show some slides about and talk a little bit of discussion about Joseph Warren Museum. We'll handle this just like we do any normal board meeting. Board members will be able to speak, and we'll try to move this as fast as possible. So, John,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
explain what-
What I wanted to start with was just kind of a recap of how we got to where we are now for the decision to move forward with phase 2 of the Joseph Warren Museum project. The first slide. These are basically, there were 4 resolutions last year that kind of started this off. Resolution 99 of 2023 appropriated $12,897.75 from the general fund to be used towards the Joseph Warren capital project. Resolution 100 of 2023 established the Joseph Warren capital project H 424 in the amount of $62,897.75 using the $12,897.75 from resolution 99 allocated from the general fund by that resolution, and 50,000 that was in the 2023 budget for phase 1, which is the design of the Joseph Warren Museum. Then resolution 124 of 2023 allocated $80,000 from ARPA to complete the remaining cost of the phase 1 design. So then resolution 125 increased the Joseph Warren capital project by 80,000 in ARPA and the 62,000 previously from the other resolutions, bringing the capital project to 142,897.75. And then DPW awarded the design to Labella for that amount in the summer of 2023. Next. So during that time, and now previous to that, the Historical Society and DPW, the Historical Society has been meeting for a few years to discuss the Joseph Warren Museum project, all focused on having a museum honoring Joseph Warren, the founder, the county's named after Joseph Warren. Everyone knows that. In time for the 250th anniversary of the Revolution, which is this summer, summer of 25. So the Historical Society, DPW met numerous times to discuss what to do during phase 1. The Historical Society and DPW determined the requirements for the interior design of the building, what it needed to look like in order to house the collection of Mr. Shane Newell, who is on in Zoom and will speak later, but his collection of Joseph Warren memorabilia. So they worked on the interior design. DPW and Labella determined the requirements for a public building. I'm sure we're going to talk about the cost. We have to keep in mind, this is a public building, so it needs to meet certain ADA standards, fire standards, safety standards, etc. by the state. It's different than just a personal dwelling or a house that someone lives in. It's considered a public building. Then the Historical Society specified external building requirements, basically to meet the essence of a house that was reflective of the 1700s. And that was part of the design. The design was completed mid-December of last year. And the project was issued for bid, or construction bid, on January 19th of 2024. Bids came in February. We got 3 main construction bids that ranged in the amount of 700,000 roughly up to about $1.4 million. Then we also had separate electrical, plumbing, and mechanical contracts or bids, because under New York municipal law, for any public building that exceeds the cost of 500,000, you have to have a separate bid for electrical work, a separate bid for plumbing work, and a separate bid for mechanical work. And so the main construction was set out as a lump sum bid. That's the best way to bid these types of projects. We had a very comprehensive design by Labella that laid out all the specifications of the building. So it was pretty straightforward for construction companies to bid. And the bottom line cost of the museum is $996,000. And we rounded that up to $1 million. Basically, that's roughly what it's going to cost. And that is for the construction of the building with the construction contract and also the additional electrical, plumbing, and mechanical charges. And so the bottom line for the museum, 800,000 was awarded by the Tourism and OCTAX Committee initially, and 200,000 was awarded from the general fund, unappropriated fund balance by the Finance Committee. 200,000 was earmarked in the 2024 budget, but it was removed when we were working to make the budget work. So that money was put back. You know, the Finance Committee chose to use that funding from the general fund unappropriated balance. So then the decision was that the general fund unappropriated balance would fund the entire project at $1 million. To be reimbursed by $800,000 by the OCTAX committee using occupancy tax over a 3-year period. So that's basically where we stand today. And at the last meeting, we decided to convene this workshop to discuss the Warren Museum project. Keynote, DPW has devoted 200 plus hours to this effort. That's probably another $20,000 of DPW time. And I say, you know, equivalent of 1.5 road projects. So continued work on DPW detracts from their ability to spend money to complete the road projects that are in the budget. The operation of the museum, because that's one of the discussion topics from that we heard from the last meeting, the board meeting or committee meetings. The following costs are not included in the $1 million. Transportation of Joseph Warren memorabilia to Warren County, display cases to display the memorabilia, museum lighting for items in the display cases and other displays such as artwork on the wall, audiovisual equipment, basically everything. At the completion of this construction, you get an empty house. And you know, it's a public building, a museum. Everything that goes into that facility has not been included in any of the cost. And important to note that so the contract bids are valid till May 20th of 2024. If we don't make an award against these contracts, they'll expire and they will have to be rebid. And, you know, we've had a discussion, Kevin Hajos and some others of us believe the cost will only go up because just construction costs in general have significantly increased. So if we want to build what we've set forward in the design, we would have to, you know, probably make the approval to bid it by the next board meeting. And the other key point is if we decide we're not going to we want to reduce costs by changing the design, then we'd have to go back into design work. And then we'd have to rebid that out. And that definitely would take us past the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution if we intend to have a museum in place by then. Okay, so that basically concludes my introductory portion. So that I think at this point, I had a slide and I took it out, but we're going to have a presentation by the Historical Society to talk a little bit about what they see the vision going forward for Joseph Warren Museum is. So, sure. I think Shane Newell.
Without objection, we have who is it? Shane Dolan?
Shane Newell is on, they're asking if he can speak first. He's on Zoom.
Okay, can we see that presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to come and present to the Board of Supervisors today. I'd like to address a little bit specific to the collection and its purpose. So I've been collecting Joseph Warren related items for the past 2 decades. I've curated an art collection mostly of all historical memorabilia dedicated to the life and leadership of Joseph Warren. It contains early engravings and contemporary works of art depicting Joseph Warren in various narratives that we know he served in his lifetime. Much of that collection is currently on display for the past 2 years over at the Warren County Historical Society. And hopefully you've had a chance to see some of those works. I'm going to pull up a short slide of some of the items. Of course, this is probably the most famous. Oh, I have to get to see if I can share screen here. Are you able to see that?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. So the collection is really is the only one of its kind. It is the largest Warren collection ever assembled, and it portrays a very historic story. The purpose of the entire collection is to restore Warren's legacy and with programs about Warren's life to inspire civil leadership and to encourage questions such as, what is citizenship and what are the principles of liberty and the purpose of restraint? Questions that help Warren frame the country's independence in a document that preceded the Declaration of Independence, known as the Suffolk Resolves, written in 1774. As you know, the profile Joseph Warren, his image is the county seal, and it certainly outweighs any objection that Warren had never lived in this county, nor any of the other 13 counties that are named after him. It was named after him because of his wide circle of leadership, his merit, his spark in the American Revolution, and his ultimate sacrifice as a major general and being killed in the Battle of Bunker Hill while covering the retreat as a common soldier would of his colleagues. The story is an important story of why self-government came to be and why the American experiment still depends on good citizenship and noble leadership. In just a few words, the collection is really designed to be history for modern use. I'm going to see if I can't just show you a few more pictures if you haven't seen them, of course. This is the bust of Joseph Warren that was custom made into the likeness of the bust that was made of him that serves in the rotunda at Bunker Hill. And this is probably one of the centerpieces of the collection, a nearly 6-foot wide portrait with Joseph Warren on the left there, Paul Revere, John Adams, Sam Adams, and John Hancock. And I'm happy to be available to you to answer any questions related to the collection. Thank you.
Not seeing the flag.
We can't see him. We just see him showing.
No. Did we lose it?
He just stopped sharing.
I don't know.
He's still there. He just stopped sharing his screen.
Hmm?
He's still here. He just stopped sharing his screen.
Oh, he stopped sharing.
Shane needs to share a screen.
No, he stopped sharing the screen. That's why he said
Oh.
he's still up.
He's standing by for question.
I can't hear.
He's standing by for question.
Oh. Anybody have a question for Shane? Nate?
Mr. Newell, you said something about one of the purposes is restoring his legacy. I've read quite a bit in the last month and didn't find anything negative. This isn't a loaded question. Is there something with his legacy that needs restored? Or do you mean because there's no museum in his name, his legacy isn't as much as it should be?
Great question. Certainly his legacy for the first 100 years past his death was, known throughout the entire country. Warren is known as George Washington was at that time, but the following century, his name seemed to have disappeared. And that's what I mean when I say restored, as a founding father, as a figure that people who will know who he is, that their county was named after. Certainly all of you do because you're so involved with your own county, but so many people do not. And that's what the mission among myself and many other historians are to see that Warren is restored to that noble legacy that he held.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Newell? Okay, I guess the members of the Historical Society would like to address the board real quick. Thank you, Shane.
We at the Historical Society started talking about this process of creating a museum after Mr. Newell came to us and said, I've got some pictures you should show. So let me just point out, here's the 6-foot painting that he referred to. Next slide, please. With the people identified, Joseph Warren on the left, Paul Revere, the Adams family, the Adams, and John Hancock. Next, please. The museum would function much as our original plan was to start the Joseph Warren Museum of History and Leadership because we're historical, but we also were interested in the leadership aspect that he was a prime example of. The pictures here are on the walls of our small temporary exhibit gallery. So please come over and see them. There's more than just paintings and engravings. There's maps and other stuff. Next picture, please. We are chartered by the State Education Department, and one of our charges is to educate people. This picture here, I told Shane that I would color in the bottom, but he wouldn't let me. It's an unfinished thing, but still piece exhibit.
His life was considered unfinished and it was intentionally painted that way.
And that's why you wouldn't let me finish it. Okay. And we're also, we have a program working with interns. We've had them from several of the high schools in the county and the college. So we would hope that we could work with the schools and offer some credit for those kids who are willing to be interns in our program. We have it now as part of the Historical Society, but we would also encourage students who might want to be docents or work on some of the exhibits or whatever in the new museum. Next. The museum would be used for the educational purposes and especially in the world of debate, because we have pre-COVID had a number of high school debates and we've been really pleased with the results and we'd like to continue with that. But notice this is topics pertaining to Joseph Warren, the revolution, but on current topics as well. Next, thank you. Joseph Warren was a leader. As Shane mentioned, he went to fight at Bunker Hill. And even though he was one of the ups, he fought with the men and he lost his life there. And just to remind you, that's early in the revolution. So we often wonder where Joseph Warren would be had he survived that experience. Next. The Sons of Liberty. Walt Disney wasn't wrong when he made that movie in the 1950s. The Sons of Liberty, he was one of the founding members. Next. And of course, some maps, lots of related material. There isn't just portraits of Dr. Warren and his lovely wife, but maps and other material to read. Next, please. We do have a display case. There's the bus that Shane referred to. The medals. He was a Mason. He was the Grand Master, and there were 4 Masonic organizations in Massachusetts, one for the Irish, one for the yeah, I'm drawing a blank. African Americans and 2 for British, and he was the Grand Poobah of one of the English ones. Next. And then we can't overlook tourism because they certainly provide us with a lot of funding and all, but we're working closely with them. And in a report, 39% of tourists were seeking other cultural destinations, and this certainly would be high on the list of that. Thank you. Questions for us?
Does anybody have a question for Stan or anybody in the Historical Society? Supervisor Onion?
You have a lot of the items already at the Warren County Historical Society, but we have other items. Keep coming. How far away are they?
Shane's house in Massachusetts,
Oh.
outside of Boston.
Oh,
And it's not something you just throw in the back seat of the
Right.
car. So,
okay. Exactly.
yeah.
Those educational panels on the wall will also be.
Don, unless you speak into the microphone.
Okay, well, the panels on the back wall there were developed by Don Rittner. Raise your hand, Don. Our executive director. They've been there for a while, so if you had a chance to read them, you'll see that they will be part of it. There will be an interpretive video to get people tuned into Dr. Warren and the times, and other displays. As you saw in the material we posted, a replica of his doctor's office, a replica of his study or library. We want a library as part of it, and we want to have cross our fingers, herbal or rose garden outside that he might have had as a doctor.
Are there any other questions for Stan? And I'll ask him just to stand by and then we'll have the board discussion. Hey, who would like to start the internal discussion? Supervisor Molino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm at our operations and management meeting 2 weeks ago for the festival space. An idea was brought up. And I'm not here to say to replace it, but an idea that some of us at that meeting thought was a good one. And it was brought up by our new supervisor, Vinny Casito from Lake George. And I'd like him to overview what he suggested.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. I'm the new guy, so I'm not trying to push into Lake George. Shane, how you doing? Vinny Cressito,
Doing well, good to see you.
good to see you too. So it was just a thought. I don't know if there's any traction to it, but we have the courthouse up in Lake George, which has some empty square footage in it. And there's the possibility of DRI money available. Would you entertain a thought of bringing it to Lake George? I'm not trying to push it into Lake George. I'm not, but the building sits there. It's historical. It gets a lot of foot traffic in the summer. The upstairs has some space in it. The downstairs has a little bit, 300 square feet. Shane, would you consider having a museum in Lake George at the courthouse right in the center of town next to Shepherd Park?
Well, being a fellow graduate of Lake George High with you, certainly I would consider that. You know, the offer of the museum was that, or my collection was that there would be space provided for it and it would be adequate to keep it safe. But the location was always a question, and I'm not entirely sure of, the necessity of a new structure for it. The viability and the use of taxpayer dollars is something I'm very sensitive about as well as anyone else is. So I leave that obviously to this board to decide. But I'm open to whatever suggestions are more practical.
What's the
and
minimum
That would be
square footage?
my pledge.
Okay. What's the minimum square footage that would be required to set it up properly?
Well, it's a matter of wall space, because so much of it is large portraits, but, in that such a case, I probably would put it on loan to where that location, and maybe it could be moved to other locations through different time periods. And maybe once the 250th passes and the focus isn't on Joseph Warren, perhaps we would certainly find out over a period of time just how impactful this was in a space perhaps different. So, but I would say you'd have to have no less than, 50 square feet or 50 linear feet of wall space to assemble most or all of the collection, and maybe one glass display case if we wanted to be able to get the medals and other smaller items up on the wall.
Okay. Well, it has a potential to save the county a lot of money. DRI money is out there and it fits in the border of the DRI. That money's a little bit ways away, so we'd get it later on and then reimburse it. But just a thought. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about it, but just a thought. Supervisor Bean?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the things I wrote an email to, I think, the vast majority of the board members. If I missed a few, I apologize. My background was fundraising for 25 years. And my only worry about this is it's kind of a cart before the horse. I'm not diminishing Joseph Warren's legacy, but oftentimes in higher education, what you're looking for is someone to actually donate the money to create it, and then also donate an endowment fund to keep it operational. Right now, Johnsburg has a Tannery Pond Community Center, which was gifted to the town, and we now are leasing it to the Tannery Pond Community Center. It's a cultural organization, but part of the reason for that is because we couldn't continue to maintain it. Without an endowment in place, basically, we were falling behind as far as maintenance was concerned. And so a building that's going to cost $1 million, in the end, or there and abouts, you have to have money in place. And I'm not sure that, my concern is, would the county have to continue to fund this to maintain the building once it's up and running? And that's also for staff, if you're going to staff it. My thoughts.
Supervisor Runyon.
My question was, I also read that this building would have needed sufficient heating and air conditioning because of the artifacts. Does your museum already have that in place? Like the right humidity level for the artwork? Your courthouse?
Is that to me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's heated. I don't know as far as humidity, but there's pictures on the wall right now that need to be cared for. So I
Okay.
can't answer the humidity level of it, but there's heat and air conditioning in the building.
You're set up already? for
Yeah,
it?
we're set up. We're handicap ramp and we're set up for it.
Oh, okay. ADA.
Yeah, there's other things in there, yeah.
Mhm.
Ben?
Thank you, Chairman. I think this is a wonderful concept. I spoke to the administrator about maybe an alternative proposal in addition to Lake George. And late yesterday afternoon, I apologize for not mentioning it earlier, dropped off a proposal or a letter of interest from James Griffith, who is the general manager of Aviation Mall. And if John's prepared to maybe talk about some of the other proposals or conversations that he's had with other supervisors, I think that would be helpful also.
Okay. You want to do that now?
I can distribute these if you'd like. I can distribute these.
Yeah, okay, while he's doing that, John will distribute the letter from Aviation Mall. Does anybody else have any comments they want to make about the potential of the museum or Supervisor Strout?
They're all the
Yes.
same, just pass it
They're all
down.
the same.
Oh,
Well,
I'll get my name.
you know, who was behind the fiery language that originally started this whole event that ended up being a revolution? Joseph Warren, who was one of the, as was pointed out earlier, one of the founders of the Sons of Liberty. It was Joseph Warren, who authored the Suffolk Resolves. That was Joseph Warren. Who was behind the Boston Tea Party? Joseph Warren. Who was behind Concord and Lexington? Joseph Warren. Who lost his life at the Battle of Bunker Hill because he volunteered to fight as a soldier, even though he was a designated major general. Joseph Warren. I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's minds here of the importance of Joseph Warren. However, Warren County, this Warren County, not the other 13, thought there'd be value in having an institution, the only one that we know of, that would be dedicated to educating the public, heighten their awareness of Joseph Warren, whose efforts and contributions to this day go largely unrecognized. So this was going to be a national effort. This would be a museum, I think, that would be nationally recognized. Now, we have a building, it's a county-owned building. That can't really be used. It's not brought up to, I mean, as a public building. You do need to bring that building up to current standards. In doing so, we have New York state laws that make everything expensive. You've got Wick's law, prevailing rates, ADA compliance, all the other things that go with a public facility, which this was proposed to be. So the investment not only would be for a museum of national importance, but it would also be for a building that's largely unusable, and it is a county asset. It's not like you threw the money into the wind and it's gone. You end up with a valuable asset that can be used for public purposes. So, you know, I'm open to alternative sites, but I think we need to understand that the sticker shock needs to be understood. That if you make this facility for anything else, it's probably going to cost about the same amount of money. So, you know, and as you know, I've been a strong supporter of Joseph Warren. I portrayed him in 2013, which is our
Just take it.
100th anniversary for Warren County. And I still portray Joseph Warren in various venues, mostly fundraising and such. So I hope you all at least gain a respect for Joseph Warren through all this effort that you probably didn't have before. And it would be nice to have a museum that would be well located right here near exit 20 without parking issues. There's plenty of parking, easily accessible. It's just a great location and very visible. So the location that we're proposing is very good. I realize the costs and the sticker shock. I understand that. And I'm not going to hold it against you if that's your concern. It's my concern too. Well, thank you.
Anybody else, Supervisor Nadeau?
For me, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The sticker shock is the biggest thing for me. I think there's times when we have projects come before us and they're double what we expected, which was stated in this case. And there's times when we have to say, yes, you know, we have to get County Route 11 back open, $1 million. We can't afford to say no. For me, this is not one of those times. The default answer this time is not, well, everything's up. You know, labor's up, materials up, insurance up, utilities are up. The default answer is we sought bids. We had many meetings in 2021. Everything, we added up the bids and it's just more than we can afford. And so we can't move forward. The idea from brought up earlier in this discussion, I think is great. You know, prove it out in a small setting that's already existing. Downtown Lake George is a fantastic place to put it from traffic and things like that, foot traffic. A house that if we spent $1 million, 142,000 extra dollars on design, a ton of DPW labor, which is not free, would kind of look like Dr. Warren's house, childhood house in Roxbury, Massachusetts. And that after we receive a pro forma from the Historical Society that calls out a net year one loss of $4,400, it's not sustainable in year one. Automatically sounds off alarm bells for anybody trying to calculate return on investment. If you're getting rained out on the lake in the summer, you're going to go to the outlets. You're going to go to an indoor trampoline park that has 500 people every weekend. You're going to go to the Hyde Museum that has Van Goghs and Picassos and Cezannes. I was at an event at the Hyde last summer. Some of you were there. They raised $395,000 privately in 3 hours. This project's had 3 years and it hasn't raised anything. We were told, what I read online and saw on videos from 2021 was that part of this would be funded privately. Warren County residents are extremely philanthropic. They pay for things when they want to, they invest, they give when they want to. They gave that night at the Hyde and nothing from this. I would also say about OCTAX, I pay OCTAX. I'm a tourist in my own town. I support local businesses. I stay at the Queensbury, stay at the Great Escape Lodge with the water slides, go up to Gore Mountain. We're not exempt from paying OCTAX just because we live in Warren County when we stay at hotels. And as I said in my email, it takes $25 million in hotel revenue to generate this $1 million. I agree with Supervisor Stroud. The question is not if this project's meritorious. It's where does it fall on our list of prioritizations of necessary projects? And I just don't think, my humble opinion, that it falls high enough for $1 million public dollars. $1 million at the bike path, at the fish hatchery, where we have a master plan already designed by Labella. At a hamlet, our planning department in a hamlet with streetscaping and walkability can do a lot for Pottersville. Something that I think would have a better chance at attracting people. And as we've discussed, if you add up these 4 tranches of expenses that are massive, litigation, we just approved $750 last week or a couple weeks ago. SUNY Adirondack, we just approved in finance, 1.4 million. We're going to finance it. Unresolved union negotiations and mid seven-figure emergency road repairs. I don't know what that is, but it's probably $10 million. We keep being told by our county treasurer that we're staring that minimum required fund balance right in the face. I would be enthusiastic about a motion to amend where we just provided maybe $200,000. But if it's for this building, which costs $1 million, my fear is if we give 200,000, it'll just be perpetually seeking 800,000, which it's proven over 3 years that I can't raise. And so that's where I stand. A vote against these resolutions, I would say, it's not a vote against arts and humanities or museum or this museum coming to fruition with private funds, or at least some sort of matching private funds. It's not a vote against Dr. Warren, Private Warren, who died in the advocacy of the birth of this country. It's a vote against excessive spending and the fact that I don't think we have the money. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Wild.
Mr. Chairman, at risk of embarrassing myself for following our young orator over here, who's done such a nice job. I am also very interested in the two alternative opportunities that come in front of us. What really is my first opportunity to see this about the mall. And being a representative of Queensbury, I think the mall would be very quick for us to be able to understand the return on our investment moving forward. Yes, we will miss the 250th anniversary, but we do have many challenges on our budget. And I'm not sure how close we are. I think someone from our treasurer office might be here to say how close we are to broaching that line of our general fund, our reserves that we need to have. So if we keep on going like this, there's going to be more opportunities for us to spend money. I think this is a great opportunity to value or evaluate the draw on this. And it's also in a great location. People will go to the mall, and they do go to the mall. So I would consider this as well as the Lake George. But I'm not for spending all this money right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Turner.
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that Joseph Warren isn't a great patriot of this country, or was a great patriot of this country. I have to agree with Supervisor Etu and Supervisor Wild that this is just a little bit over what we need to be spending right now. And I do very much like the idea of Lake George, especially if we're looking at bringing in tourism. That would be a great location for tourism. I'm not sure about the aviation mall, if that's actually going to bring tourism, if people will go there specifically for this. But that's a great alternative in Lake George. Thanks.
Thank you. Supervisor Driscoll.
Yeah, and I appreciate those comments. One of the reasons I contacted Aviation Mall is James Griffith is the former member of the Washington County Board of Supervisors, longtime supervisor from the town of White Creek. So he's familiar with how county government operates. Also, a couple months ago, my family was visiting my wife's cousins in Scranton, Pennsylvania. We went to a mall, and there was an aquarium there. There was also a theater similar to like the Wood Theater that operate out of the mall. Malls have had to reinvent themselves in order to be viable. Doctors' offices, accounting firms, all kinds of private businesses are taking space that Sears, Roebuck, and stores like that historically have had. When we set up a site for people to be tested for COVID, Aviation Mall was the first place that New York State recommended that we look at, or that all counties look at, malls, especially upstate. So I think it's worth exploring. That's what I hope that we do. If there's any other opportunities or options, we should do our due diligence and at least check them out. I think I think all of us agree, the concept, and that, we should have, some type of a, facility, to honor, Joseph Warren. It's just, the site. I worked out of that building in 1986, shortly after I moved here. It was a private not-for-profit. We had to do a lot of work to get that building in shape so that we could have customers there. Unfortunately, and it was an anti-poverty agency, but the number of walk-ins that we got decreased by over 50% before we decided to move down to Warren Street in the city of Glens Falls. I would differ with my friend from Queensbury that it is a accessible thing. I don't know that other than people going to the pool during the summer or to the Warren Center for an elderly loved one, that there's a lot of traffic on that part of town. Thanks.
Thank you. Supervisor Bruno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think that the mall is a good idea. I'll be very blunt. The place is on death's doorstep as it is. They've got all kinds of vacancies. Nobody is going to come here in the summer and they don't go to the mall. If they go anywhere, they go to the outlets on Route 9. Now, if you have bad weather, they're looking for something to do. Being in Lake George in a historical building, they're much more apt to go there. I think that's a very good idea to put it in there. Again, I just don't think that being in the mall is attractive in any way. And I don't think it would be a good idea. I think Mr. Casito's offering of the old courthouse, which is historical, I think you've got the square footage there that is adequate for this. I would opt for that. Thank you.
Mr. Merlino.
This is a tough situation and it's tough to sit, but I feel maybe if we take the gentlemen that are running this museum right now, and I know they're very into it, they worked hard at it. Let's go look at that building. And maybe a couple of supervisors can come along and see if it fits the need of what we really looking for. They might even like it. I don't know. I'm not putting words in their mouth, but it's just and I feel the same thing. Over $1 million plus with the report they sent out that if they run short after a couple of years, they're going to come back and ask the county for some more money. It's just it doesn't sit well with myself also.
Anybody else wish to comment?
Yeah,
Supervisor Paget.
it was very clear to me that Supervisor E2 made a lot of good points. And I mean, if we're not in a good financial position to spend $1 million, then we're not in a good financial position. And if there's other areas of Warren County that would benefit more, that's another excellent point. I do like Mr. Driscoll's, Mr. Bean's, and Mr. Casito's ideas. I think any one of them could work. I would just bring up the point that we are sitting in a year-round facility right here at Warren County, and the gentleman said it's 50 linear feet. And if all these ideas somehow strike out, you know, we have a lot of year-round residents that come here to, I don't know where they would be, the strategic, intentional locations, but maybe we're sitting right in the facility that 50 linear feet could be allocated for this collection, and the people that come here and live here in this county might appreciate it more and more, you know, when they're coming to the DMV or the social service building, and they'd be proud to be a member of Warren County. Just a thought, if maybe Mr. Casito's idea strikes out and as an additional consideration. That's all.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to? Supervisor Conover.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In March of last year, when
the resolution was put in front of this board to spend up to just short of $143,000 to advance this project. Passed the board unanimously. Some of the board members that are here today weren't on the board at that time. Some were vacant. But it garnered enough support where it would have passed if it had been a 2/3 required vote or a 3/4 required vote. Almost 900 weighted votes. And it had my support. As you know, we have a wonderful museum in Bolton. And but I think a project like this really needs to have that type of support. Because to answer some of the questions that were raised today, you know, are we going to need to be budgeting more dollars going forward? Because of additional territorial responsibilities for the development of presentation space, to finish the space, cabinets, you know, all of those kinds of things, finishings, such as lighting, special lighting. The answer to that is yes. I think. At least my way of thinking, it's yes. It was for us in Bolton, and I think it would be that case today. So in addition to the $1 million, do I think that there's going to be the need to have additional dollars for the and those dollars may be mitigated by some contributions or other types of fundraising, but in the end, I think that it would fall to us. And if we don't have the broad support for that type of delivery, if you will, on the concept, then I think that we should be spending $1 million renovating the space. I think that kind of commitment is what's required here, right? I think those of us that have museums, we know that. We know that. And you would have thought or would have hoped that some of the optional analysis would have been done early on. And I'm sure some optional analysis was done. But if there are other options that people think need to be looked at, I think we need to do that just to make sure we do our due diligence on the subject. But do I think the square foot cost at location B is going to be much different than what it is at location A? No. That might be more. It may be more difficult running those HVAC systems. It may be more difficult delivering on those electric systems. It may be more difficult to, there may be structural issues. There's handicap accessibility issues. There's all kinds of issues. So on a square foot basis, do I think it would be substantially less? Probably not on a square foot basis. But I think these are options that I think, at least to satisfy the interests on the part of some of the board members today, I think need to be looked at. And I don't think we can do that within the timeline of an award that needs to take place here in whatever. So, and then I'm going to take a little time here, but I think it's very important to deliver the following message to our historical society, the wonderful people that, and volunteers that are part of this process. I would hope that you would not take away from this meeting today any kind of criticism or negative thoughts. This is the process that we have. It's not perfect, but it's the best yet conceived. It's what Mr. Warren fought and died for, right? And so, my recommendation is that if we fail to act, that we do nothing and then the bids fall. I don't know that we need to necessarily vote anything down, although if the vote comes to a vote, would have had my support. We'll have my no votes for the reasons that I've stated. And I do support the project. There's one small thing. Let's not forget that even our tourism reports recommended the development of museums as an important way of fostering a future visitor activity. No, it's not Disney World, but it adds to the texture and the story that we have to tell and I think it's I think it would be a great step forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else, which Supervisor Stroud and Supervisor Strainer? We'll keep going.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at all the cars that are going on a Gurney Lane right now. There is a substantial traffic movement through that area. But let's back up a little bit. When Shane Newell, Dave Strainer, and I talked about where would we locate a Joseph Warren Museum, because there are none and he deserves to have one. Where do we go? Well, there's this house next to the Warren County Historical Society that's not being used. It's available. It made sense. It's not being used. It's available. I think everyone agrees the Joseph Warren Museum and Research Center is a great idea. Why are we here today? Because no one, myself included, thought that to rehab that building would cost what we're looking at. So I just wanted you to realize in the beginning, all of this made sense. And I think if the costs were a lot lower and reasonable, we wouldn't be here. I think you'd be approving it. What no one saw was the price tag, the bids that came in. It floored all of us. All right. So if we could get the same building for a lot less money, rehab to the point where it could be used as a Joseph Warren Museum, that'd be great. But at $1 million, I'm not hearing the support. And I agree. Looking at alternatives certainly deserves some kind of merit. Oh, and I want to correct a mistake. It wasn't the centennial, it was the bicentennial. I dressed up as Joseph Warren and we celebrated. Okay. My age is gone. I might have been here for the centennial too, but in any event, I just thought it was important for you to realize what we were thinking a couple of years ago. It all made sense. Then, all right.
Supervisor Strainer.
He still has the pictures of that also. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving us an opportunity to meet like this. It's been nice to hear everyone's opinion and hear, the facts and figures. I would like to research the Lake George property to see if it is feasible to do and to see if what the cost would be. I can't disagree with John. The cost for the $1 million, it did kind of floor me, but when you look at the cost of labor, cost of materials, making it ADA compliant, putting in a sprinkler system, the cost just kept rising. And especially with Supervisor Etu, bringing up the financial part of it, I probably would have been a little more reliable to vote on it had I not had to listen to ACC coming in today. And now they need 1.4 million. And we just had to spend $5 million on doing the culverts up, in Bolton in that area. I just don't think at this time it's the right time to spend the money. I understand that we can maybe we can't use the bed tax money. That would be nice, but at this point in time, we've kind of, used most of that up and I don't see it coming back really quick. So I think this has been very informative and if, I'd like to find out what it would be like to go to Lake George first and, maybe slowly do that building. I mean, there's no saying we can't make this date that we can't slowly
rehab that building and get it to where maybe someday we could move it there. But I just, this is just a very tough time. Thanks.
Anybody else? I will say that we are under a time frame. We don't make a decision today. But there will be a board meeting on the 14th of May. We will need to make a decision by the 14th of May if we're going to keep these bids or be able to use these bids. I believe that's correct. So we are under a little bit of a time crunch. That gives you a couple weeks to think over what was said today. And I think everybody agrees Joseph Warren is important to Warren County, is important to the history of this country. It just seems to be the price tag, but there again, you have a couple alternatives you can look at. And if you come back, hopefully we will need to make a decision on the 14th of May. We don't make a decision today, but we will need to make a decision by the 14th of May if we are going to keep these bids and move forward with that building. Any other comments from board members before Supervisor Wild?
Mr. Chairman, if it's appropriate, I'd like to make a motion to waive the rules to go into executive session.
We have a motion to waive the rules. Do we have a second to waive, that motion to waive
And
the
if I
rules?
could, it's to request an executive session pursuant to Public Officers Law, Section 105, 1-F, to discuss matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Wild. We have a second by Supervisor Bean. Any discussion on the motion to waive the rules? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And do we need a motion to go in?
No, you need one for executive. Just to clarify, the motion was to waive the rules which say that the board doesn't take action in a workshop setting.
Right.
So now you'll need one to go into executive.
Now we need a motion to go into executive session. Is that by you also Supervisor Wild?
Yes, please.
Second by Supervisor Bean to go into executive session for the reasons stated. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We will go into executive session.